this morning for the start of the legislative session, but also the start of a very important conversation about K-12 education funding in California. A couple housekeeping rules. Please mute yourself while we're having the discussion. And then once we go into Q&A, use the raise hand icon on your Zoom feed, and we'll take questions at the end. Again, I'm State Senator Anthony Portantino, and going to act as both the author and host this morning. Our bill number is SB 830. It was crossed this morning. And so I also would like to welcome education leaders that are with us today. We have Dishman, who is the president of the California School Employees Association and an employee of the Kern County High School District, which is a school district of 38,000 students. So thank you, Shane, for being with us this morning. We are also going to be joined by Kelly Gonez, president of the Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education. As you know, LA Unified has 600,000 students in California. It is the largest school district in California and the second largest school district in the country, only behind New York City. And so we're going to be joined by both Shane and Trustee Gonez, who will speak after me. Obviously, with the holidays just coming to an end, we have been in serious conversations with a number of other education organizations and education leaders, frankly, getting very positive feedback on our proposal. And we anticipate the coalition of school-related organizations to continue to build significantly and substantially, because this is a conversation that has long been going on in California. And clearly, at a time when we have a $31 billion budget surplus, K-12 education should be at the table during those conversations. And so this is an effort to make that conversation start early in the legislative year and continue right through the budget negotiations and then through the legislative deadline, as both a budget conversation and a policy bill will be needed to drive this issue. California is one of only 6 states that does not consider student enrollment figures when we budget. Let me say that again. We have led in so many areas as a state, but in how we fund education, we have not been leaders in that aspect. And we're one of 6 states that don't use enrollment and use ADA. California has long been a leader, and here we are with Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, and Texas. Those are the states that don't do enrollment. And frankly, what happens is districts plan their budgets and expend funds based on the number of students enrolled, but they receive funds based on their average daily attendance. For example, if a school district enrolls 100 students, but their attendance rate is 95%, the school district must prepare as if 100 students will attend class, but only receives funding for 95. This bill will remedy that inequity and will define average daily membership as the amount of aggregate enrolled days for all pupils in a district or county office of education from transitional kindergarten to grade 12. And then we'll divide the total number of instructional days for the local education agency in that academic year. SB 830 requires local education agencies to receive the difference between what they would have received under the local control funding formula based on average daily enrollment and what they received under the local control funding formula based on average daily attendance for the fiscal year. In order for local education agencies to be eligible for this supplemental education, and that's important. What we're talking about is increasing education funding across the board in California based on enrollment. Estimates have that to be at around $3 billion plus would be added to education funding for the state of California. That's why this is significant. It's fair, it's an increase, and it's targeted. And we know it's successful based on the other states around the country. This requires an effort. People have asked, well, what about truancy and other efforts about making sure students are in class? This requires 50% of this supplemental education funds to go to chronic absenteeism and habitual truancy. We know that students learn and can can receive socio-emotional support when they're in school. And so we know from other states that this will have only a positive benefit on the entire school as a holistic approach, not just the budget. It includes safeguards to in school, no school districts receive less funding. That's also important. We have a hold harmless provision in the bill. We want to make sure that there's only winners with this new paradigm. There's not going to be any losers. Some districts have already come back and talked about doing a 3-year average. We're looking at that as well to make sure that we're holding school districts harmless. We're increasing funding across the board, and that education is well positioned to have this conversation on the surplus. We know that the pandemic has had longstanding impacts on student achievement and mental health. We want to make sure that as we come out of it, and as the state has the resources, we're going to invest it in our most precious resource, which is the young people, our children, our neighbors' children, and children across the state of California. I know some of you may have questions during this press conference about back to school issues. We're not going to cover those. Each school district around the state is making those decisions and will be releasing that information as those school districts make that decision. Today, we're going to talk about average daily attendance and enrollment financing, not about the pandemic as it relates to what schools are going to be doing over the next month to 6 months. So please indulge me and respect that piece of it. I see that Trustee Kelly Gonez has joined us from the LA Unified. I know you were finishing up a board meeting. Thank you for being here. And Shane is here as well. So Shane, we're going to go to you next since Kelly just joined us, and then we'll give her a chance to collect herself. So with that, I want to introduce Shane Dishman, the president of Csea, to share a few words.
Thank you, Senator. What a thrill to be here today and to support SB 830. As you know, California has been using the average daily attendance method for calculating school funding for more than five decades. We are, as you said, Senator, we are only one of only 6 states, including Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, and Texas, that school funds are based on average daily attendance. And the ADA is an inequitable method of funding public education, as it takes resources away from schools in lower income communities because they experience higher rates of absenteeism. You know, our members, including instructional assistants and attendance clerks, know that student absences actually cost money and demand additional resources to track down absent students and prepare makeup assignments. School districts plan their operations based on the number of enrolled students as opposed to their attendance rate. For example, if a school enrolls 1,000 students, but their attendance rate is 95%, the school must still prepare staffing, facilities, equipment, and instructional materials as if 1,000 students will be attending class every day. Enrollment-based funding, commonly known as average daily membership, is the student counting method used by most states to fund schools because it allocates funds equitably based on the actual number of students each school must be prepared to serve. To ensure that schools continue to prioritize attendance and address chronic absenteeism and habitual truancy, under this bill, school districts will be required to maintain staffing levels to address attendance, absenteeism, and of course, truancy. At least 50% of the additional funds allocated under this bill are dedicated to address absenteeism by providing additional services and support that improve school attendance and address the root causes for students who are chronically absent and habitually truant. This bill will ensure that no school receives less funding per student than they currently receive. The truth is, attendance-based funding punishes students in schools that most need the state's financial support. That is why Csea is co-sponsoring this bill to move to enrollment-based funding so that California schools will be funded equitably and have a greater financial stability and predictability. It's time for California to fund schools fairly equitably, and to take a step towards providing adequate resources for schools and staff to meet the needs of our students. Thank you, Senator, for allowing me to speak on this very, very important bill.
Thank you, Shane, and thank you for those points. I mean, it is truly important that we do things right in California. We have to get school funding right. Thank you for your sponsorship of SB 830. Also with us this morning is the Honorable Kelly Gonez, who is the president of the LA Unified School District Board, also a proud sponsor of this bill, and very happy to have you, and certainly the voice of 600,000 students. So thank you, Board Member Gonez.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Senator Portantino. It is great to be with you this morning. As you shared, I'm Kelly Gonez, and I'm the president of the Los Angeles Unified Board of Education. I first want to thank Senator Portantino for his leadership and his commitment to our students. LA Unified is proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill, SB 830, that would provide supplemental education funding to districts based on the difference between enrollment and average daily attendance. And as my colleagues have noted, we know that attendance in school is critical because a student has to be in class in order to learn. Yet, when students are facing trauma, economic uncertainty, or dangerous routes to school, the simple act of showing up to class isn't so simple. School districts like LA Unified, with high numbers of students in historically underserved communities, face higher levels of chronic absenteeism. And that absenteeism means that school districts have less funding just when their students need more supports and more resources. Senator Portantino's proposed legislation would provide a more equitable funding mechanism so that school districts like mine can really address the root causes of chronic absenteeism. And by addressing those root causes, we will see more students in the classroom every day learning. School districts are already working hard to boost attendance, and LA Unified is really proud of the work that we've done to create a positive school climate that encourages all students to be at school. We've launched an Attendance Matters campaign in partnership with our local sports teams to incentivize high attendance. September is School Attendance Month, where schools host a variety of activities to teach students and parents about the importance of attendance every day. We provide case management and conduct home visits. We have a student recovery day every year where volunteers throughout the district go and reach out to chronically absent students. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, all of these efforts resulted in great strides, and we reached 95% average daily attendance here in LA Unified. But we know that many of the communities we serve have been hit the hardest by the pandemic, and the corresponding trauma and economic hardship has put our attendance rates this year closer to 91%. That drop is a loss of dollars right when our students need us and need those resources the most. So I'm really hopeful that the legislature will support SB 830 to provide supplemental funding to school districts serving high needs populations. This change would be a step closer to funding equity and meeting students where they are, which is especially important at the historic time that we're in. So we're proud to be in support, and again, so grateful for Senator Portantino and his leadership.
Thank you, Board Member Gonez, for being with us this morning. Clearly, having Csea and having LA Unified be part of the initial conversation. And as I said, we're very optimistic that a number of other education organizations and groups will be coming on board as this progresses through. Certainly sends a message to the state of California of how important this is. And as I mentioned earlier, with a $31 billion projected surplus, this is the time to look at structural reform in how we fund education. And with the pandemic highlighting the needs across the board in our school districts, clearly districts that have been challenged face more challenges. Clearly, the impact on our students' wellness has increased, and this is the time to increase education funding. This is a time for K-12 to be front and center in the budget conversation going forward. And I'm hopeful that SB 830 will inject us all into that conversation. So thank you to both of you, Shane and Kelly, for being here. And with that, we'll take questions. If any of the press wants to use the raise your hand feature, I'll call on you and we'll take some questions. I see Lara Cordy got her hand up first, followed by Susanna. Lara, unmute yourself and give your question.
Hi, Senator. Thanks so much. I'm Lara Cordy with the Sacramento Bee. I wanted to ask whether this funding for school districts would be automatic or if they would have to apply for it.
They would have to, my understanding is they would have to submit their enrollment figures to apply. It's not an application process, it's a communication process. They have to communicate with their local education agencies to meet the requirement, but that's a pro forma filing.
Okay, thank you.
Susanna?
Thank you, Senator. Susanna Luthi with Politico. I was wondering if you have a projection for how many districts will see a boost and any range of how much extra funding those districts would receive under this proposal.
What we have now is the number that I've been given is should be at least a $3 billion increase across the board. I don't have how many, what the percentage is per districts, but all districts are going to get more. So there's no question about that, but I don't know how much more each district is going to get. Clearly, when you're injecting $3 billion into K-12 funding across the board, everyone's going to benefit. And we want to make sure that people out there's always fear when you have change. And that's why we're writing into the bill a hold harmless provision. And that's why some of the districts have come back and said, look at a 3-year average. So we're going to be looking at what the best way to hold harmless is, but we anticipate that everyone is going to benefit. Anyone else have a question? Anyone else have a question? Shane, do you have any final comments? I don't see any other hand. Am I missing anybody? If I am, call out. But Shane, since no one else has a question, do you have any final comments you want to make?
Senator, I'm just so excited and appreciative of you taking on this task and this role to hopefully allocate additional funding for every school district. And this is across the board initiative, which is just absolutely fabulous because there are districts out there that are receiving less. So I'm very excited going forward that this will come to fruition. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Kelly, do you have any other parting comments?
No, I'd echo Mr. Dishman, and I think it's great that this is an opportunity to invest in all public schools in California, but also ensure that we're addressing those underlying equity issues and that the students and families who were most historically underserved before the pandemic, who've only faced exacerbated challenges in attending and succeeding at school, that we can really get them the supports that they need, especially those we serve in LA Unified. So thank you so much for bringing this forward.
Great. And I think it's important to mention that this is not a new idea. This is something many districts have been asking for years. And obviously with having most of the states around the country using this model, years ago, I read there was an innovation strategy handbook that was given out. And it said one strategy of innovation is to look at what other people are doing well and then do the same thing. And so this is something that other states have been doing well. This is something that has made a difference in the lives of young people because it increases funding to help our students across the board, and in particular, the most vulnerable students. So it's not a new idea. My districts the school districts in my district have been asking me to look at this for a long time. And now that we have a $31 billion surplus, this is the time to make that structural change. And it's important to assure folks that there will be increased funding across the board. No one is going to lose funding. School districts are going to get increased funding. That helps everyone. Obviously, those districts that need more are going to get that increase to help those students. So we're going to look at the 3-year average. We're going to hold districts harmless. We're going to increase funding. And that's what this bill is going to do. So thank you all for being out, and the coalition will continue to grow. And this is going to be a very important conversation as we move through the legislative session. Happy New Year, everybody. Be safe out there. Practice good behaviors. And I wish you all well. And thank you all for being here with us this morning.